Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, and above me here on the screen, Joe Clark. And Steelers training camp is underway. We finally have actual football things to talk about. The offseason slog is over, and this is going to be a jam-packed show, obviously dominated by training camp topics. We're going to discuss kind of a grab bag of topics at the beginning of the show. Hopping around the roster to various small stories that have popped up over the first 2 days of practice. Then we'll hop into the quarterback situation more specifically. Obviously, everybody wants to know about that, followed by Joey Porter Jr. and the latest developments with his contract situation. Joe, how are you hanging in there the first couple days of practice?
Doing well. Like the earlier practices a lot. It's definitely been a nice change, and yeah, things are going well. How about you?
Yeah, it's nice. Right about now, as we'd be in the thick of practice last year, and I guess practice would be just kind of ending right around now, and the player interviews would be starting. We've already pretty much written up everything we're going to write up today, so now just, maybe some small stories will trickle in the rest of the day, but the flow for us that cover the Steelers, it's a lot nicer. I'm sure, I don't know, I guess. Well, let me ask you this, Joe, off the top. The feel of camp is going to be one of the things that everybody's talking about. It's been one of the main topics that every player's been asked about. The differences between McCarthy and Tomlin. Obviously, they're not doing contact anymore. The practice has moved earlier. McCarthy's pace of practice is much more, I guess, accelerated than Tomlin's. Every minute is accounted for. What's your overall impression of these changes so far from what you've been able to tell?
I mean, I think it's been a positive, and what I think the key there too is that it's a positive in the eyes of the players. I mean, I think if you ask most of the players, they'd like to be done with their work early and have more time to hang out with each other, get some rest, do whatever they want to do. Thus, waiting around later in the day for practice. For them, they keep their bodies healthier with less tackling. And I mean, I don't think we really saw any tangible impact that having the most physical practice in the league did anything to help them on the field. I don't mean, and
Right.
they were still a pretty bad tackling team the last couple of seasons. So I think having things kind of down to the minute gives players an idea of what to prepare for. I think overall it'll just kind of boost the morale and chemistry there. And for me, it seems so far. I mean, it's been 2 days, so hard to really have a real firm opinion, but it seems like it's been a positive so far. And I like how Mike McCarthy kind of has said a couple of times that everything's rooted in some sort of, study, science, whatever that he's kind of adapting to. So I like that, he's, even though he's been in the league, been a coach for a long time, maybe adopting to some modern methods to kind of keep guys happy and keep their bodies as fresh as they can be.
Yeah, you said it best. If they actually had been the best tackling team in the league for the last few years, or proved that maybe playing in the hot of the summer at the hottest part of the day somehow gave them better conditioning or mental toughness or whatever it was, if those things were true, then yeah, I think there'd be more kind of people upset about the change. But it's hard to really argue against it when the main benefit wasn't even really helping them out. And so yeah, move that thing earlier. Get players, they don't have to get quite as exposed. I mean, I don't know if you've ever worked out or done anything. Like if you, I don't know what sports you did back in the day, but man, when you're trying to get instruction and you're like 70% or 80% to your kind of capacity of exhaustion just from being in the heat, it's harder to kind of take in what's being said, and maybe you get a little sloppier with the technique and whatnot. And so simply it just being a little cooler in the morning during practice, I mean, I think that would be a positive. I mean, I'm sure you could argue, well, these guys are football players. They need to be tough. I get all that. But, man, there's something to be said about just being able to be a little bit more precise in the morning sessions. The precision of practice even goes down to the very minute, or I guess second, if you want to look at it that way. Practice was scheduled to end at 12:46 on Wednesday. It ended, I guess, 3 or 4 seconds after 12:46. I know a lot was made about that, probably more than needed to be made about that, but it is somewhat notable. The fact that they had such an odd end time to practice and they stuck to it. It sounds like they are having a guy out on the field with a megaphone. I don't know if that's Scarnecchia or one of the other coaches they've hired to kind of facilitate practice and be a clock management expert. But it is good to see, especially with the issues Mike Tomlin's had in that area over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I mean, it keeps everything on track. You're not you can still run a drill an extra time here and there, but you're not, languishing and doing something for far longer than, maybe you should be. You can keep things moving, keep guys ready, keep guys active. So it's efficient. I really think that's the key thing is just the efficiency of it all.
And look, I haven't looked into Mike McCarthy's like challenge rates or his performance in, I'm sure there's Cowboys fans and Packers fans out there. They're like, what are you talking about? Like I could point to this, and this time where his clock management was awful and whatnot. Well, first of all, maybe he's learned. Learning is a thing, so maybe he has learned from his failures of the past. But also, yeah, I mean, not that practice habits guarantee that on Sunday everything's going to translate, but there is something to be said about him hiring guys, having very specific roles for some of his coaches. Yes, Mike Tomlin unofficially or informally kind of gave Terrell Austin some of the clock management and challenge management responsibilities, or at least like had him help him out with those decisions in the past, but it wasn't really like listed officially, and I don't know how formal that even was. So to have these formally laid out, they're on the Steelers website. Like you can see like Bourbonic, I think his name is. He's a quarterback / game management or clock management assistant, and so that kind of thing's good to see. I mean, how many times have we all talked about, oh my gosh, Mike Tomlin has missed a challenge, or I mean, his challenge rate over the last several years has been awful. Or how many times he mismanaged, fourth down decisions or the end of game, just clock management, when to burn those timeouts. Hopefully we see an improvement in those areas. On to other topics than just practice management and McCarthy, because there is a whole lot to talk about. Broderick Jones is back at practice. I don't know if that was really expected. I sort of expected him to be on PUP maybe for a while this year, just given, the report of a setback earlier in the offseason. I know Omar Khan kind of refuted that and said there wasn't a setback. And, maybe, I guess we should have trusted Khan there because he's back. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I was surprised that he came back this early. I kind of expected he was going to be a pup guy to, start the season, but glad to see him back. I mean, I think that's obviously a great sign for the depth of the Steelers' offensive line. Obviously, he looks a little bit thin. He said he's down to 300 pounds, so it's going to take a while for him to kind of really get back into playing shape. But obviously, great for him to be able to get back here. It seemed like, for a while that injury could have been, not maybe not career threatening, but certainly season threatening. So great that he's back this early into camp and that he's seemingly good to go. I mean, think it's going to be a tough path for him to climb back into the starting lineup, but he's a great guy to have as a swing tackle if you need him during the season.
Yeah, and I think during OTAs or minicamp, one of the two, at one point he spoke to the media and more or less kind of said he wasn't sure what was next. So at one point he was kind of worried, at least a little, that this could have been a career threatener. I think today he clarified, kind of interesting, he said he's never felt better after a game than that game when he got injured. And so he didn't even really know that his season was over, let alone that his career was in jeopardy. And, I think it all came crashing down on him. He said he talked to the training staff and they were like, you're done for the year. And he was like, what? So a bizarre situation there. But, obviously he has kind of not a role model. I don't know what the right word is, but he sees an example of Asante Samuel Jr., who had a similar surgery from the exact same surgeon, the team doctor, on the Steelers, who's one of the best in the field on that particular type of injury. And, he's back, and really, we'll talk about Asante Samuel, I'm sure, in a minute, but he's been thriving at training camp so far. So to see something like that, probably gives you a little extra kick in the butt. Like, if he can do it, why can't I? And, more power to him. He thinks he can return and be a starter. Right now, he's 300 pounds, he said. He's looking to get up closer to, what did he say, 315 or something, I think was his goal. I'll recall back to last year when he, I believe, shed weight prior to training camp, and he explained part of his reason was it's way easier to add weight than it is to shed it. And so if I come into camp slightly underweight, that gives me room to grow and get to my kind of ideal play weight. And so, you know, I'm not necessarily as worried about him adding that weight back.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that at all, really. I mean, for an offensive lineman, especially, going into the season, I think it's a pretty easy thing to do to add weight. And you look at Broderick, he probably hasn't had the opportunity to be in the weight room as much as some of these other guys. Now that he's cleared and he can get back in the weight room, I think, to add those 10 to 15 pounds shouldn't be too difficult.
While we're on the topic of weight, and maybe even Broderick Jones can partner up with his Georgia teammate Darnell Washington to figure out how to add weight quickly, because he certainly did that earlier in his career. But Darnell Washington moving in the other direction. We've talked a lot about this since he revealed that the Steelers have a weight management program backed by the threat of fines. They're small fines, but they are fines, and Darnell Washington sounded motivated by that fact, and I think it's paid off because there was a picture posted. There was a video on Steelers Instagram that Dave Bryan, our on Steelers Depot here, posted a still image of it, and man, he looks a lot closer to the 264-pound NFL Combine version of Darnell Washington than he does the 320-pound 2025 version of Darnell Washington. Joe, what's his ceiling this year? I mean, are we talking enough about Darnell Washington?
I mean, I think the two of us have talked a decent amount about Darnell Washington. I think we're both pretty excited about his upside, but as a whole, I certainly don't think so. I mean, I think I looked over, it was over this week, and PFF had him rated as like the 27th or 28th best center in the league, and there were some names ahead of him that I really wasn't too sure about. And I think, after he kind of had the breakout as a receiver last year when he was obviously a little bit bigger, or maybe a lot bit bigger. We don't really have his weight count right now, but like you said, he looks a lot closer to the 264 version. I definitely think there's a lot more upside. I mean, he's a guy that I think now can make plays more with his athleticism, become more of that red zone threat while still maintaining his ability as a blocker. I mean, I think the talks of moving him to offensive tackle can be pretty much quieted given how he looks right now. So I'm certainly excited about what he can do in tandem with Pat Freiermuth, and I think he can be a really big part of this offense.
Camera angles play a role in looking kind of displaying his current weight, and so you have to look at a couple different pictures to really get the full image of him. But man, I think if I had to guess, he's probably somewhere in the 290 to 295 range, closer to the 290 range if I really had to get down to it there. And he said that was his goal weight. And so maybe he was kind of telling us the answer to the test back on the Jordan Schultz podcast earlier in the offseason when he said that is his ideal play weight. Potentially he had already had the conversation with Mike McCarthy and already knew what the expectation was. So maybe him saying that's his ideal weight was actually the Steelers saying that that's his ideal weight. And so maybe that is what he's at. I wouldn't be surprised. And if not, I would expect him to probably settle in that range. There's some people kind of worried that, he's going to lose a little bit of weight and that's going to take away his superpower, which is, blocking and just being a juggernaut with the ball in his hands, impossible to tackle. Joe, I don't know about you, but I still wouldn't want to tackle him at 290 or 295 at that size.
Yeah, I'm not really concerned about that aspect at all, given that, even coming out of Georgia, he was a fantastic blocker and just an absolute tank still in general. I don't think, the 20, 30 pounds or whatever is really going to make that big of a difference when it comes to, his play power and his ability to block, especially. So I'm not worried about that.
Finishing up the offensive line conversation, we talked about Broderick Jones. He's currently playing kind of second team left tackle, some right tackle as well. You got Dylan Cook kind of starting things out on the right side. Maxi Honachor getting at least a couple first team right tackle reps as well. That competition seems to be shaking out kind of as expected. Right guard, kind of similar. I would say it's shaking out so far sort of as expected with one caveat. The first team when they first came out was Spencer Anderson, second team, Joe, Stephen Jones, right?
Yeah, that was surprising. Brock Hoffman was playing left guard, Stephen Jones right guard. So that was definitely a little bit of a surprise to see, given that I think we both kind of thought it would be, Brock Hoffman playing that position because him and Spencer Anderson are kind of thought to be in competition. I don't know if it necessarily means that they're not, but it was a surprise to see Stephen Jones in that right guard spot.
I do believe that Hoffman has since taken first team snaps at guard. He's also played some center. He's the backup center, right? Or sorry, I think he's the third team center behind McCollum at the moment. But man, I wouldn't be surprised if McCollum gets pushed off the roster just due to Hoffman having that versatility. I think it really comes down to, man, if Hoffman ends up being your starting right guard, then you probably do need a backup center. Maybe you do then keep McCollum. But we'll get into the nitty gritty of the roster stuff. Eventually, I just thought that was an interesting wrinkle to the offensive line competition for now. Not a ton to report. Obviously, the pads aren't on until Monday. A few more days here to go before the pads come on, but we'll know a lot more then. On the other side of the ball, we talked a little bit about it, but Asante Samuel Jr. making the most of his opportunities. Joey Porter Jr. starting out on PUP, which was sort of surprising. Jalen Ramsey, that one was definitely a surprise. Starting out on PUP, he had a knee injury during mandatory minicamp. Dante Kent, last year's, what was he, a 7th-round pick, I think.
Yep.
He's injured, or he was injured last year pretty significantly. I think he got injured twice last year, and seems to be coming back slowly. I think he did a little bit more work the second day of practice than he did the first, but still on PUP. And so that secondary, which we've been talking about, is loaded with talent, a little bit less loaded right now, and Asante Samuel Jr. is making the most of it.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing for the Steelers secondary. I mean, we talked so much about Dalen Everett, but now you have Asante Samuel. It's kind of stepping up, and with JPJ on PUP, I mean, it's not. I don't think it's anything long term to worry about. But we talk about how cornerback Omar Khan said cornerbacks are the most injured position, and I think having Asante Samuel play as well as he has gives you really, really strong depth. And, as we've talked about, maybe once you get into the season, if you're healthy, that maybe he could be flipped as a potential trade chip if you need help elsewhere. But I mean, yeah, through the 2 practices, he looks like he's back to what he was. From what we've heard from when he was a starter with the Chargers, making plays. He had, I think, 2 key pass breakups yesterday, another big one today. So kind of guy that's been around the ball, and I think that's a really positive development for the Steelers. If he can kind of get back to being a starting caliber player, then that's awesome.
I think he had his first 3 seasons with the Chargers. I think it was like 11 pass breakups, 10 pass breakups, 11 pass breakups. So this is a guy who has good ball skills. I think he had a pair of interceptions in all 3 of those years, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't have it up, but I think it's something like that. Impressive ball skills either way, give or take a few there on the stat end. But it seems like he's rounding back into that form. Last year, he only had, I think, 1 pass breakup, and it was an interception for the Steelers in, I think, 6 games that he played with the team last year. And so if he's rounding back into those first 3, the trajectory he was on with the Chargers, then, man, the Steelers suddenly have one of the strongest, probably top 3 or 4 cornerback, tandem in the league. And if you start to include the slot options, I mean, we've been talking about it, but this secondary, if they're all healthy, is very loaded.
Yeah, I think, and that's one area where we just haven't seen the Steelers have a lot of success over the past few years. And the secondary's kind of been a little bit iffy. I think, having a strong secondary is really going to benefit the overall strength of the defense. I mean, we pointed out in the last episode how many explosive passing plays they gave up. If you can limit that this year, and that's a key focus of Patrick Graham's defense too, then you can get back to being a defense that can get after the passer a little bit more. And just overall, I think it's going to boost your defense and maybe make it back into, that elite level conversation.
A couple other small things, the outside linebacker rotation of Watt, Highsmith, Herbig, getting on the field together at times. It seems like they were experimenting with Herbig kind of playing, more off-ball in that kind of situation, or not off-ball, but kind of in the middle of the thing. Obviously you can only have 2 guys on the edge because there's only 2 edges there. So one guy's got to play in the middle. It looks like Herbig was the one doing that, but also TJ Watt was pretty much right away moving around, especially on the first day. He was moving around a ton, left, right, center, wherever it is. I think a little bit less today from what I could tell, but it certainly seems like they were eager to start showing off the new defensive philosophy right away.
Yep, and today you had Keanu Benton playing outside a little bit too, so definitely seeing some changes with the new defensive staff and how the defense is operating.
All right, I don't think there's too much. I mean, Roman Wilson. Let's get to that real quick. Roman Wilson and Jeremy Bernard, as expected. Wilson is the number 3 for the time being, and he seems to have a pretty good grip on that number 3 because, like I said earlier, guys like in the right tackle competition, you have Ihanichor at least getting some first team snaps, and I don't know, there's probably some other competitions too where the guys are getting at least some first team snaps. In this one, at least according to Jeff Hathorn, 93.7 The Fan, Steelers reporter, he said there really haven't been any first team reps where Wilson isn't in the starting lineup, and so they're not only getting him in there a bunch, but he's been targeted quite a bit. I think today he had a diving opportunity, like a 45-yard bomb that he came up short with. I think there was a holding call, so that might have had something to do with the drop or whatever, or I don't know if it could be classified as a drop. But either way, Roman appears to be getting targeted a whole lot, and that's, I think, good news. Even if you're a Jeremy Bernard truther, I think that's good news for the Steelers.
Absolutely. I think, the more good receivers you have, the better. I think Mike McCarthy can utilize both those guys. And I think if you're getting positive contributions out of Roman Wilson, your offense is going to be, I think significantly better than it was last year.
Mike McCarthy defined his 6 pillars of Steelers football fundamentals. He came up with, he called it the Steelers 6. And so, you know how Mike Tomlin had his Tomlinisms? Well, Mike McCarthy has his McCarthyisms, I guess ignoring the historical use of that particular word. But these 6 fundamentals that he listed: ball security, blocking, tackling, big plays, pursuit, and finish, and then mannerisms and disguises. A lot of those are kind of, well, these are fundamental. So a lot of these are things that any team would kind of emphasize: ball security, blocking, tackling, pursuit. But I thought it was interesting that one of the fundamentals was big plays. He wants big plays on both sides of the ball. The Steelers' defense definitely had that culture with their whole ball hunting culture, turnover culture that they seek to build. But the offense has been missing that for a couple years, and looks like he really wants to bring that back.
And I think that's a very beneficial thing for the offense. I mean, you look at this, you look at what they've done the last few years, and yeah, the grounded out drives can be fun sometimes. They can wear down a defense, but a lot of those grounded out drives end in the 15, end in the 10-yard line, and end in field goals. I think you get a big play, an explosive play or two on a drive, you're much more likely to punch it in the end zone.
And then mannerisms and disguises, he kind of said that that's more of a quarterback thing, but I also take it as, the Steelers, how much have they been talking about position flex with all of their players? And he specifically said when it comes to, maybe a competition between Jeremy Bernard and Roman Wilson, that they're not so much competing for the same role as much as they're competing for opportunities, which was his way of saying all the receivers are going to be playing all the positions. And he said, we don't want to have 150 play playbook in the game plan. We want to have, 20 or 30 plays, and you can kind of make 20 or 30 plays look like 150 plays if you got different guys running the different routes in the same, might be the same play, but you got guys lined up in different spots. And so that's kind of one of the ways I took that last one. He didn't super elaborate on that one. Maybe someone will ask him about it in the future, but I think that pretty well wraps up the grab bag of early camp takeaways. We'll move on to the quarterback situation. We've kind of touched on it, but Mason Rudolph is starting out camp as quarterback too. A bit of a surprise, mostly because Will Howard was the QB2 throughout all of the spring. And so we thought it would kind of just continue that way. And we thought the Steelers would really want to get a good look at Howard because, it really looks like it's going to come down to Rudolph versus Howard for the 3rd spot. Well, really the 2nd spot, but Aaron Rodgers and Drew Aller are more or less locked, so we'll just call it the 3rd spot. And there's been some talk about keeping 4 quarterbacks as well. Joe, what do you make of Rudolph being named QB2? Does that change your opinion on anything?
It doesn't right now. I think it'll be interesting to see how things progress throughout camp. I do think it's interesting that, with Aaron Rodgers supposedly being on a snap count early in camp, I don't know if we've really seen that yet so far, but McCarthy says he's getting 40 to 50% of the snaps. Those snaps are kind of going to go more to Rudolph, Howard, and Aller, maybe more in an even split. I think that's interesting to get more looks at some of those guys. I think it's just kind of a courtesy thing for Mason Rudolph. If you put him at QB3, you're putting him behind the 8 ball immediately. So I'm a little bit surprised, but I'm not completely shocked. He's QB2. He's the veteran. He's kind of earned it just honestly, just from being around and being a good soldier throughout his career. So we'll see how long that lasts. If that continues, right before cut day, then maybe I'm going to change my opinion. But for now, I think I'm still pretty firm on my thought process that if it does come down to them only keeping 3 quarterbacks, that Howard will be kept ahead of Rudolph.
Yeah, I still lean the same way. I just keep coming back to if Mike McCarthy said that he believes he can be a starter in this league, I think he used the word definitely, then you definitely can't cut him because the Steelers need a starter long term. Not saying that Howard can or will be that guy, but if the head coach believes he has a chance to be that guy, you can't cut him. You just can't. And so I get, you want to keep Rudolph because of the experience thing. Honestly, the more I think about it, I think I am joining the 4 QB club, even though it really puts the roster crunch in other areas. Like you're going to have to sacrifice a good special teamer or some depth in the secondary, or maybe you're going to have to cut a guy like Caleb Johnson, who you might not want to have to part with right now. Those are the kind of decisions you have to make if you're going to keep a fourth quarterback. But honestly, I'm kind of trending that way. Jerry Dulac, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, basically threw his hat in that ring. He said, he thinks that is what they will do, and he's heard from league sources, talking to league sources that kind of think that's the expectation at this point. And, I'll take a little bit of issue with Dulac downplaying the special teams. He was basically saying, oh, you could just get rid of a special teamer. Who cares? I don't necessarily share that opinion, but I do kind of now think that 4 quarterbacks is likely.
I think Dulac's spent in the last like 3 or 4 years just trying to downplay and crap on special teams as much as possible. And every time he's proven wrong. I mean, now it's a new coaching staff. We'll see. Honestly, the fact that it's supposedly coming from league sources makes me buy it a little bit more. Because I think Dulac's been wrong more than he's been right the last couple of years. But yeah, I mean, I could see it. I mean, both McCarthy and Omar Khan both said it was a possibility. And I mean, if it's somebody like Caleb Johnson that they're letting go, then we haven't seen Caleb Johnson really demonstrate a ton of special teams value, so that would make more sense. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if the fourth quarterback's going to come. I think Dulac said, "What are you going to do? Keep a 10th defensive back?" Well, you have 3 defensive backs on PUP right now. Like those guys go
Right.
down all the time. So yeah, you would keep a 10th defensive back over a fourth quarterback. Um, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. It wouldn't surprise me as much right now as it would have maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I still don't really view it as a super likely possibility.
Well, on the Dulac train and whether or not you think he's right or wrong about things, let's go ahead and transition to our next topic and set the stage here. Joey Porter Jr. obviously has been wanting a new contract. He's due for a new contract. He has not yet gotten a new contract, and he held out through all of the spring because of it. Or not held out, rather held in. He was present, he just wasn't participating. Well, according to Jerry Dulac, that rubbed the Steelers the wrong way. Let me see if I have the exact quote here. Yes, I do. Quote, he did not do himself any favors by coming in with a new coaching staff and not doing anything in the spring. That did not sit well with them. Now, Dulac ultimately went on to say that he does think the deal will get done because it needs to get done. The Steelers need him, and they know that. But maybe some slight frustration, which is interesting when you're trying to potentially, get one of the most lucrative cornerback deals on the market.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the new staff was annoyed because especially in the defensive secondary, communication's super important, and if he's not around for that, then I certainly think that could be something that bothered them. But I mean, like you said, it won't affect the contract. It probably shouldn't affect the contract. Um, but I mean, now that he's on PUP, he tweaked his back. There definitely could be some frustration there, but I think the deal is going to get done, and I think Dulac said it's going to come in under. He doesn't think he's going to get 25 million. That would surprise me if he's that low. I mean, I think we're probably looking at 27, 28. Maybe not reset the market territory or over 30, but under 25 I think would be a surprise to me. But yeah, I mean, I understand if there's some frustration, but at the end of the day, it's really not going to matter, especially if he comes in and plays the way he played last year.
Yeah, under 25, I have a hard time buying that as well, but you do have to keep in mind that the franchise tag amount, I believe, is projected to be like 23 something. Let me pull that up and make sure I'm not speaking out of turn there, but I'm pretty sure that is the case. 2027 projected franchise tag cornerback 23.6, and so the Steelers do have that in their back pocket. Maybe that's the number that this Pittsburgh's trying to negotiate off of and saying, hey, Joey, if you don't take this, we can just get you for this. next year or whatever it is. So 23.6, that might be the number that Pittsburgh's starting. Maybe, maybe not. In the meantime, Denzel Ward just reset the market to 31.1. Christian Gonzalez has an offer on the table from the Patriots. This is according to owner Robert Kraft, so pretty good source there. That will reset the market. I don't know what that number is, and I don't know if it would still reset the market with Denzel Ward resetting it since he said that, but I would think it probably does because Denzel Ward really barely pushed that market north. Honestly, some people took that as like, oh my gosh, the market's getting more expensive, and Gonzalez and Witherspoon haven't even signed yet. To me, the way I took that Denzel Ward deal, I was like, maybe that's a good sign for the cornerback market if it's just going to stall out here at the lower 30 range. Because, man, I was a little bit worried that much like the wide receiver and edge rusher market, it was going to start pushing rapidly towards 40 like they did last year. And then you'd really be in hot water with Joey Porter.
Yeah, I mean, he got what 31.1, so barely broke Trent McDuffie, and I think that also gives the Seahawks and the Patriots a lot of leverage here now, and they're negotiating. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't really seem like we're going to be creeping towards that 40 million number because I share the same concerns as you, and it seems like the Steelers could be in a better spot here if we're staying in the low 30s.
All right. I think that is everything that we wanted to talk about here. Gonzalez started practicing, so maybe that deal's coming any minute now. Maybe we'll have clarity very soon. Um, Porter being on PUP, do you think that's just a hey, stay away from the media guy kind of thing?
I think it's definitely part of it. I mean, I think they would probably have some sort of repercussions if they really threw a guy on PUP without anything, but like he tweaked his back. Like I tweaked my back getting out of bed, so I'm sure
Same.
it's really not anything crazy. So yeah, I think it's more of media does not gonna be a scrum to talk to him every day like there was with Hayward last year, where they're literally like stalking it out for him to leave practice. And it's like, will he talk? Will he not talk? And then they get annoyed when he doesn't talk. So yeah, it's probably more to protect him than anything else.
All right. Well, I think that's it for our topics today. We are going to do a listener question now. And just a reminder, if you want a question answered on a future episode, 412-254-3145. That's in the show notes as well if I spoke a little too quickly. But just tell us your name, where you're from, a brief question. I'm sure you guys have plenty of them with camp starting back up. We want all of them. You can also text the line if you don't want your voice on the show. That's totally fine. Once again, just your name, where you're from, and a short question, and we will get that on a future episode. This one from Brett, a frequent caller out of San Angelo.
Hello, Depot Dive. This is Brett from San Angelo, and I just had a couple of quick questions. Every year there is kind of three players, and I just want to get a quick prediction of who you think they will be. The first one is, who is that player who will come out of nowhere the first week or two of camp and explode on the scene only to fade and disappear by the end of camp? And number two, who is that guy who will start off absolutely terrible and everyone's going to plan to cut them and they will eventually move forward to claim a roster spot? And then the last one is, who is that veteran this year who come in with a job who will ultimately end up cut by the end of training camp? Love to hear your predictions. I'll sharpen this the answer.
All right, thanks, Brett, for the question. A three-parter here. Oh boy, where do we start, Joe? First one is a player who will come out of nowhere the first week or two of camp and explode on the scene only to fade and disappear by the end of camp. Any thoughts, Joe?
It's a tough one. I think, we've talked about a Sunday Sam. I don't necessarily think he's going to fade and disappear. I don't know if he's going to keep up his hot start. Maybe you can look at somebody like Max Hurlman. Seems like he's made some plays so far. Robert Tunyon seems like he's made some plays so far. I don't know if those plays will be as consistent by the end of camp, but maybe not a firm answer there. I mean, I'll go with Robert Tunyon just because it seems like he had the touchdown from Aller yesterday, a couple of plays. I think maybe his production or performance will not be as what's the word? Not be as I don't know what the word is, but he won't be as productive towards the end of camp.
I think I'll throw out Stephen Jones just because he kind of came out of nowhere. He fits that description, and this honestly this is not based on anything other than just my hopes. But I kind of hope that he's somebody who fades, because that would mean somebody like a Jennings Dunker has risen, and that is ultimately what I want to see. They spent a top 100 pick on him and even traded up to do so for a reason, and I want to see him, kind of hit the ground running, maybe not with a starting job, but man, kind of looking good and maybe threatening for a starting job, at least, by the end of camp. So that's my hope there. Number 2, who's the guy who will start off terrible? This is kind of the inverse, and everyone is going to plan to cut them, and they'll move forward to claim a roster spot.
I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one because it's hard to, be terrible and there's no pads on. I could see some I don't know. So maybe somebody like just to throw out a name like Dean Lowry, maybe. He's a veteran, he's got familiarity with the coaching staff. Maybe he struggles early on and ends up playing pretty well down the stretch and gets one of the last defensive line spots. I don't know. That one's a little bit tougher.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if anyone's. I don't know who's going to start out terrible. I mean, does Caleb Johnson finally wow us? He's a guy who I think by default has kind of started out terrible because expectations are so low for him right now in general. So is he somebody who could, make that push, impress, and ultimately claim a roster spot? I think he's going to need to really impress. So if Caleb Johnson makes the roster, he will fit this description, I'll put it that way. And the final one, who's a veteran this year, who comes in with a job and ultimately gets cut.
Yeah, this is probably cheating a little bit because I think he probably only has a job because Jalen Ramsey's on PUP. But I think Darnell Savage is getting a lot of first-team safety reps. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up getting cut.
Interesting. Yeah, I had the same thought about Savage coming into camp, and obviously, it's so easy to get caught up in like the currentness of it all, and just oh my gosh, like he made a play, and so is Darnell Savage for real, and how much is he going to help this defense, kind of thing. Part of me is like, oh wow, he's getting more burned than I thought. But yeah, keeping in mind that there's all these guys on PUP and whatnot. So, and even Deshaun Elliott's not really been a full go. He's not on PUP or anything like that, but he hasn't been necessarily full go for every session. So yeah, he is kind of in there by default. That's a good answer. If I had to throw another one out there, who's a guy who already has a job and will get cut? A surprise cut. Man. Yeah, I don't know if I have a great one there. I guess we've just been talking for so long that there's really aren't that many like great starting battles where these guys who you could even say are like definitely going to get a job, who are veterans who might get cut. I mean, so many of the battles are kind of largely decided, so that I don't know. I'm just kind of vamping on nothing there. I don't have anything for you, Brett. I'm sorry. We answered 2 of your 3 questions. Thank you for the question, by the way, and we hope the rest of you will chime in. 412-254-3145. Our show will continue to be on Thursday. We can't promise what time because it's quite busy here at Steelers Depot, but make sure you stay up to date on the site. Refresh that page as often as possible because, man, there are articles going up just about every 10 minutes of some happening at training camp, and that won't stop for the next 3 weeks. We've got everything for you and more. Keep up to date with the Terrible Podcast with Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora. They do that every day after camp. Obviously, Alex has his training camp diaries. Those are invaluable, where he breaks down the nitty-gritty, probably more than you bargained for. He's got in there. I think his last one was over 5,000 words, if that tells you anything. And so definitely check those out. A highlight for all of our readers. If you haven't checked out SteelersDepot.com, that's the first place you should stop during training camp. I think that's everything. I'm Ross, that's Joe, and we will catch you guys next time.